2 of the Ashton Manual is really the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. It's why people read the Ashton Manual, to learn how to get off of their benzodiazepine. As I go through this chapter, keep in mind that Professor Ashton herself has stated that these are merely guidelines. These are not hard and fast rules that need to be rigidly or obsessively adhered to. Every person's taper will work differently and it will look different. How you withdraw and what you experience is dependent on the reasons for which you were originally prescribed a benzodiazepine in the first place. It's dependent on how long you took the benzodiazepine, which benzodiazepine you took, what other medications you might be taking, different life stressors that might be going on, genetics. There are so many things that come into play. It's important not to compare yourself to anyone else, not to set a specific date by which you have to be off, and to be open, flexible, and willing to adjust this to suit your needs. Having the right mind frame means that you and your doctor both have an understanding that now is the right time for you to withdraw from a benzodiazepine and that this can be a good thing. Aside from all of the adverse effects that we'll be discussing in other chapters, it's important to have hope. And Professor Ashton has said herself that in running her clinic and in helping hundreds of other people via correspondence throughout the world, she has helped people ages 18 to 80 withdraw from the benzodiazepines. And some of these people had been on them for 20 years or more, and they were able to successfully do it and have an improved quality of life afterwards. So this is doable and it is worthwhile. Having the psychological support that you need includes having the friends and family members that you feel you can educate about this, who you need to be there for you in your corner. It also means reaching out for peer support, finding a mentor who understands this, either somebody who's been through it themselves or who's educated on it and can help give you a compassionate perspective. But there are also withdrawal communities where there are many people who understand this that you can reach out to. And it is advised, though, not to become discouraged by any of the horror stories that you might hear from anyone else who might be going through this. To keep in mind, again, that each person is different and someone else's story isn't necessarily yours. Valium is the medication that is recommended for the withdrawal process. The first reason is that it has such a long half-life. There are other benzodiazepines that also have longer half-lives, but many of them tend to break down into Valium anyway, so it just makes sense to use Valium. Also, Valium comes in smaller doses, so it's easier to make the kinds of smaller cuts that are recommended in this manual, as opposed to Klonopin, which Ashton specifically mentions would not be a good option because it is so potent. It's hard to get it in a dose that would be small enough to make those kinds of small reductions. Also, in her estimation, many people just seem to have difficulty using Klonopin to withdraw. However, if somebody does not respond well to Valium, it might be a time to consider using a compounding pharmacy or something like that to help make smaller doses available to someone who is going through withdrawal. Because this is such a highly individualized process, something that Professor Ashton recommends is a crossover, where you replace whatever doses of the current benzodiazepine you're on with an equivalent amount of Valium. The purpose of a crossover is, number one, to see how you respond to the Valium, number two, to give your body time to adjust to the new medication, and also to see how much of this medication you need. If we look at the chart that Professor Ashton provides as a potential example of a crossover, you can see that if somebody were to be taking Ativan 3 times a day, you might start out with the nighttime dose. And if that person were taking 2 milligrams at night, you might not even want to replace the entire nighttime dose. You might want to take 1 milligram of Ativan and replace the other milligram with the equivalent of 10 milligrams of Valium, or you could try to replace it with a little less. Because Valium is so sedating and long-lasting, maybe you could try 9 or 8 milligrams and see how you respond to that. After you give that a little bit of time and replace the rest of your nighttime dose with Valium, then you could move on to replacing a midday dose or a morning dose until after a period of a few weeks, you've completely crossed over and are only on Valium. You're on a dose where you feel fairly stable and you're ready to continue with the rest of your taper. While Professor Ashton is somewhat reticent to give people exact time frames for how long they should or shouldn't get off of a benzodiazepine, she does recommend taking much longer than what is normally recommended or what is administered in detox facilities in places like this. That the majority of people will not be able to get off in a matter of a few weeks. And to not try and look for any quick fixes, to get past this idea that a longer taper is somehow prolonging the agony. In her experience and the experience of the hundreds of people she's worked with, it is much more preferable to take your time and give your body the chance to upregulate those GABA receptors which have been downregulated or injured, time to heal as you slowly remove the medication bit by bit. As we can see from the examples that are provided for us of various taper plans, each one can be adapted to meet your own individual needs. For instance, if somebody is starting off at the equivalent of 40 milligrams of Valium, which would be about 2 milligrams of Xanax or Klonopin, that's quite a lot. And so they might want to taper at a more aggressive rate, withdrawing by about 2 milligrams every 2 to 4 weeks. Once somebody reaches about 20 milligrams, then they could choose to slow down the taper rate and withdraw by, say, 1 milligram every 2 to 4 weeks. Also, the point at which somebody chooses to completely stop the medication altogether is individual. But Ashton does state that if you just get down to about 1 milligram or even half a milligram, this would be a safe point at which to completely stop the medication. The one thing that Heather Ashton strongly advises against is self-medicating with other GABA agonists such as alcohol and other sleep aids. Sleep aids in particular she advises against because really it's almost the same thing as taking another benzodiazepine at night to help you sleep while you're withdrawing from a benzodiazepine, and that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The other thing that is advised against in this chapter is withdrawing from other psychiatric medication, particularly antidepressants, while you're still trying to get off of a benzodiazepine. Work through your withdrawal plan, take your time, get off the benzodiazepine, give yourself a good month or two to recover, and then you can consider developing a taper plan for your antidepressant. By the way, she also provides you with an example of an antidepressant taper plan. And finally, it's important to recognize that not every withdrawal program is going to go perfectly. If for whatever reason your taper plan did not work for you, Ashton states that it's okay to try again. Start over, get on the equivalent amount of the benzodiazepine that will work for you, develop a new tapering strategy, and try again. But remember, before starting any of this, make sure that you and your doctor are on the same page and in the same frame of mind. Be sure to have your peer support in place with friends and family who understand what's going on, a mentor who can guide you through this, and peer support from the online communities who understand what this is. Also, make sure to do a proper crossover to see how you respond to the Valium. Take your time. be patient, don't have any set expectations in place, and be hopeful.